Hello, welcome to the FROSTBITES podcast. My name is Minna and I'm coming to you from northern Finland, where we have today a beautiful sunny day. As you can see behind me, we've had a couple of sunny days lately, which is really nice after the really dark time of year. It's Monday and I don't know what the date is. I have a day off and I decided to come skiing. I came to a little island which is quite near where I live. It's an island which used to host a thriving sawmill community, but now it's deserted. There are empty, gorgeous old buildings on the island and I love coming here in winter time when you can ski across the frozen sea. It's not long from the mainland, maybe 500 meters or something, and today we have minus 17 degrees Celsius, so it's pretty cold, but I don't mind. I actually quite enjoy coming here or going skiing on a very cold day. And I will film a few bits and pieces here on the island to just show you what it looks like. Over there you can see some of the old houses that are now empty. There is also the sawmill office on the island, the headquarters of the sawmill, and also an old fire station, which I will show you later. Hopefully the battery on my phone will cope with this cold weather. It usually doesn't, but let's hope for the best. There is the office building of the sawmill, a huge building, and there's a woodpecker on that large pine tree at the very top of the tree. You probably can't see it on the film, but it shows that it's very peaceful here right now. I don't think there are any other people here. There were no cars in the harbor area in the mainland when I arrived, which is just in that direction. There's one house right behind me here, and this is the main entrance to the office. It says office above the door. And this is the back side of the house or the building. And over there, a bit further away, is a tiny little sauna, which I will show you next. So there you can see the main building, and here is a sauna in a very poor state. And it must have been a very nice place to go for sauna, because the seashore is just behind those trees. So I will head over towards the old fire station. I can only film for a few seconds because my hand gets so cold in this weather that I just have to put my mittens back on quite quickly. but I hope you like these little snippets from this pretty special place. There's one more large building here, which is a bit further away from the other buildings, and behind that there is the fire station, which will be next. And here is the fire station with a little tower on one end. I stopped for a little tea break in the forest. I found a really nice spot here under a birch tree. I usually have this, I don't know what it's in English, we call it the space tarp. It's this aluminum coated tarp which protects me from wind and rain and wet ground. I usually use it when I take a break. It's very lightweight and easy to carry around. And I'm sitting on my skis so that I don't sink into the snow. And I'm just enjoying the beautiful view and sunshine and the silence. And I am drinking some new tea that I received this weekend. I went to a knitting retreat, and in our goodie bags we received a package of some tea, and this one is called Smoke Sauna. It's got some smoky flavor and birch leaves. I think they used actual birch leaves to make this tea. And then we also got some fudge, which I'm having here as my dessert. And I just ate a dried, I don't know what this is in English either. It's like a dry rye bread. And I just have some butter on. Very simple. Very simple lunch or picnic today. I went to a knitting retreat, as I said, this weekend, and we received a copy of a brioche pattern, and we had a teacher, Soile Pyhänniska, the designer of this pattern, teaching us brioche knitting. I have done a couple of small brioche projects before, but nothing this complicated. So this is a beanie called Pienet tulpaanit, small tulips. And we also received the yarn, or actually I changed or bought another skein of yarn. I received this turquoise blue, which is my background color, and I also received a yellow as a foreground color, but I changed it to, or bought another skein, this pink skein, which is more my color, but I saved the yellow one for another future project. And the yarn is Knitlops Lair Louhitar toinen, Louhitar second. which means that it's a two-ply yarn. It's fin sheep and the perfect yarn for color work, and a very good yarn also for beginners brioche knitting, because it is so grippy that if you lose a stitch, it doesn't unravel. So it's good for practicing. Also brioche. And I have already done all the repeats that were asked in the pattern, but because my knitting is so tight, I have to do a couple of more repeats than what the pattern says. I think I have to complete this motif here, and then I will start decreasing. But I have to measure before I do that. So finally we got to a bit of knitting. I will continue filming when I'm back home. I might film a few clips on my way back. I decided not to go to the other part of the island because it is quite cold and it is also getting late, as in how much daylight we have left, and I want to get back to the car before sundown. So I'm having my lunch break here halfway of my skiing, and then I'm heading back. I already skied over an hour to get here, so I hope that I will be back to the car by 5 p.m. I'll see you when I get back home. Hi, so I'm back at home. It's the next day. I was so tired when I got back home from skiing yesterday that I just couldn't start filming this episode. But I hope you liked what you saw. That's a place where I often go skiing in wintertime. And it looked absolutely beautiful yesterday because we have quite a lot of snow this winter and the weather was just beautiful. Today is another sunny, beautiful, wintry day. It's even colder, -20 in the morning. It should warm up a little bit during day, but it's a cold week that we have ahead of us. But that's what winter in Finland is like and should be like. If you ask my opinion, I love a cold, proper winter. But let's get on with the knitting, shall we? I showed you my work in progress in the forest, but it's no longer a whip. But I actually finished it yesterday. So let me tell you a bit more about this. The pattern is called Pienet tulpaanit, small tulips, as I mentioned earlier, and it is designed by Soile Pyhänniska. And I don't think it is available on Ravelry yet. I hope it will be published there later. I think it might be designed for the retreat where I went to last weekend. This is one of the few brioche projects that I've done, so I know the basic things. I have knitted one hat and one scarf before, and they had only a few decreases or increases, and they're very basic. But I think this is a more advanced project, not too difficult, I wouldn't say that. But if you know your basic brioche stitches and have done something with increases and decreases, you can totally do this. I made a couple of mistakes while knitting this. As you know, you're chatting and you're listening to conversations and in a retreat, and then you get distracted. And in the beginning, I started doing the leaf motifs in a wrong way. There's this one spot where I missed, I think, yes, I missed the leaf motif that was supposed to start here. So I had 2 columns of stitches going up between these 2 leaves. But I didn't want to unravel for it's more than 5, maybe 6, 7 rows. And I just figured something else out. I decided to do it a feature on my hat. So I eventually decreased these 2 columns to form this one stem that is going up, and from there onwards it continues as the pattern is written. But having made that mistake on this side, it affected that on the other side. There was also a mistake of having 2 leaf motifs next to each other, so I was missing a column between them. So as I was fixing the motif in the front, I had to increase here to start a new stem, and from that part onwards it continues as the pattern is written, until we get to the point where you're supposed to start your crown decreases. As I am a tight knitter and we didn't do a case swatch, which you always should do, my hat was a lot shorter than what the original pattern says. So I had to continue knitting those leaf motifs. I think this last bit here, these leaves are the part where you're supposed to start your decreases. But I continued to knit them as whole, and then I just had to figure out something with the decreases later on. And I also made another mistake somewhere in the last leaves. I wonder if I can find it. There it is. This leaf here is a little bit funny looking. This part here is a bit too long. It should have been decreased earlier, so I just made 2, or I decreased twice as much as I was supposed to get rid of it. But it's in the very top of the hat where the decreases started, and when it's scrunched up like this, I don't think you can really tell that there's a mistake. And I did my decreases a bit differently than what was written in the pattern, but I think it worked out very well. And I am thinking of making a pom-pom to put on top of the hat, but I haven't done that yet. I have already wet blocked it yesterday, and it really softened the yarn a lot. It is 100% wool, fin sheep wool, but it is the softest fin sheep wool I think that I have ever had. So it is wearable next to skin, and yeah, I'm really happy the way it turned out. And I will talk about the yarn a bit later when I show you my acquisitions. So that's my first finished objects. That's my first finished object. The second one is something that I showed you when I was working on this. This is the Moonman sweater by Jonna Hietala. It is the first individually published pattern from Line magazine, and it is now available on Ravelry. And ever since I finished this sweater, I have been wearing it almost non-stop. I've had to just tell myself that I need to wear other clothes as well. But I really love it. It's so simple, and it really is a wardrobe stable. And it was a very simple knit as well. This was a test knit for Jonna, and I knitted it in Rauwerk wool. It's ethical 100% merino wool. I think it's naturally dyed. And I got the yarn from Jyväskylä Knit Festival last year. And it is DK weight. It's knitted from the top down. And as you can see, it is reversed stockinette. But you don't have to purl when you're knitting it, because it is been knitted inside out, and then once you have completed the sleeves and the body, or the body and the sleeves in that order, you turn it the right way around, and then you pick up for the stitches for the collar and finish it off. The yarn that I used, it feels a bit rough before washing, but it really softens up. And I was a bit worried when I was knitting this, that because I'm such a tight knitter, I did get cage, but I think it might be a bit plumper than, and has more structure than the original yarn that the sweater was designed for, La Bien-Aimée DK Merino. I haven't seen the yarn, but knowing the yarn that they usually use for their thinner bases, they are very soft. I was worried that this shirt would become a little bit too stiff, but after I washed it, it really softened, and it's the warmest, most comfortable sweater that I have. I really love it. I did a few modifications for this. Well, not a few, just changed my the ratio of the decreases in the sleeves, but that's something that I quite often have to do to accommodate my arms. I have found that my arm, or the patterns that I have used previously, have all been quite tight in this area. So I usually do a few decreases starting from the beginning of the sleeve, and then knit straight quite a long time until I do the final decreases. And it's a bit annoying sometimes because you have to try on the sweater all the time while you're knitting it. But I think it's worthwhile because the sweater doesn't keep you warm if it's too tight, and it's not comfortable to wear either. So I think it's worth doing it. And the way I do the other sleeve is that I mark the decreases on my first sleeve as I go. I use those light bulb pins, or what are they called? The little stitch markers that look like a light bulb. And when I start to knit the other sleeve, before starting that, I usually also write down just the numbers between the decreases in my notebook. The number of rows between the decreases. So I don't have to count all the time from the other sleeve. I can just glance at my notebook and keep on knitting. So the second sleeve goes on usually quite quickly because I don't have to try it on and I don't have to count the rows from the other sleeve. So that's my method for knitting the sleeves. I think I used 4mm needles for this. I can't remember what the recommended needle size was, but I knit a swatch and adjust it. I usually have to go up a needle size to get the right gauge because of my tight knitting. Because I just absolutely love this sweater, and I think there will be many coming into my wardrobe as well when I have time. It is quite a quick knit though, because it's so simple. And it knits up so much quicker than fingering weight. And it's been the perfect sweater to wear this cold winter. I have also finished a pair of socks for my nephew. He requested a pair of wool socks from me a couple of weeks ago, and I dropped everything else and we started planning together. So first of all, I drew the sole of his foot on a piece of cardboard, just to know the length of his foot. And then we talked about the color that he wanted for the socks. And luckily I had my scrappy socks with me when I was visiting them. And I told him that he could pick the colors he wanted from these socks. So I asked, he's 3, turning 4 this year. So I asked him what color he wanted the cuffs, what color he wanted the sock itself, what color heel and what color toes, and he picked the colors from these socks. So he wanted this blue and green color as the body of his sock, and then I think it was this one for the cuffs and this one for the heels, and I think it was this one for the toes or something like that. I can't remember anymore. And I started knitting and he loves them. He's been showing them and carrying them around when I go visit, and yeah, he's very happy and very knit-worthy person. I like knitting for him. My next finished object is also a test knit for Linen magazine. This is for their new issue, which just came out today, issue 4. And as you can see, I have used the same yarn as for my Moonman sweater. This is the rift cowl, which is a tube that you can wrap around your neck twice, or at least that's how I usually wear it. And it has this sort of like 1 by 1 rib all the way through, but using 1 by 1 cables, the ribbing goes in different directions in the pattern. And it has a tubular cast on and bind off, which makes the edges look really nice. And it's hard to tell which is the wrong side and which is the right side because of the patterning. I used my Ravelry wool. I can't say leftovers because this is the first one I knit, and then the Moonman was knitted from the leftovers. I had quite a large quantity of that yarn because I had been planning to make a cardigan, quite a loose cardigan designed by Andrea Mowry for Brooklyn Tweed. I don't remember what the cardigan was called, but that was the reason why I purchased the yarn, but I changed my plans and made these two. And what else? The designer is Emily Green. I don't remember if I said that already. I think for me, being a tiny person, this cowl could have been just a tiny bit tighter because it's quite loose when I wear it twice around my neck, and it's too tight when I wrap it around 3 times. But if I have a thick winter coat with a hood and I put it under the hood, then it's just perfect. And it goes so well with my Moonman sweater that sometimes people think that this is actually part of the sweater. And I think that's all of my knitting finished objects. But I do have some sewing to show you as well. So first of all, what I'm wearing. This is an old one. This is the Broken Wings by Joji Locatelli that I knitted from Elsa wool. It's 100% Cormo wool and it is so incredibly soft. I love this. And then I have this dress that I sewed up at my sewing class. I used a pattern from the Ottobre Design Women magazine. I actually don't have it here with me because I left it at the classroom. But I think it's from one of the issues from last year. I wanted to see if I could make a nicely fitting garment from that magazine. And I think it's quite okay. I made some changes when it was still a pattern. And then I had to make some changes to it when it was already finished. And it doesn't fit quite as well as if I had done the pattern from scratch to fit my body. But I'm quite happy with it, and it is more on the loose side. Whereas looking at the pictures in the magazine, I thought that it would be a tight fitting in the top part. But as you can see, it's not. It's quite loose, but it's very comfortable, and I don't mind that it isn't quite as tight. I will show you the neckline. I cut a piece of fabric which I then folded. I sewed it first on the I don't remember. I sewed it on the right side first, and then folded it behind, and then top stitched it with a double needle in the front. And I have done that before, but I have never known or measured how much fabric I should use for the neckline before. So I asked my teacher if she has a rule or something, a guideline, how to do that. I have usually just cut a strip of fabric and then, without even pinning it on, I have tried to stretch the strip more than the actual neckline, and I haven't measured anything. And sometimes it has worked out just fine, sometimes not so well. But my teacher suggested that I cut a strip that is 1 centimeter shorter from both sides. So let's say if the neckline was 30 centimeters altogether, measured around, I would then take 2 centimeters shorter the whole strip of the neckband. And that's what I did, and I think it worked perfectly. For the sleeves or the cuffs, I did a bit longer fold here so that I can wear these turned up like this if I wanted. But they are not too long to wear like this either. I think I didn't change a lot in the upper part. The hem was way too long, which is a bit frustrating because I was really tight on material, and I could have probably matched the print a bit better had I had more fabric, but I only knew the length when it was almost finished. And also in the hem, I have similar fold, and this is how it looks like. So I added an elastic band here in the waist because it was very loose in the waist area, and I think that helped a lot. I sewed the band, the elastic band, on both sides separately. And yeah, I'm quite happy with how it came out. The pattern, the fabric is some fabric that I bought from the craft fair in Oulu last year, from a vendor called Iloinen Kettuliini, but I can't remember who the designer of this pattern was or this deer pattern on the fabric, but it was a Finnish designer anyway. Yes, so that's that. My other sewing finished object is my bird sweater, which is not dirty this time. If you've been watching earlier, you know that I have tried to show you this sweater in my previous 2 episodes, I think, but always something happened and it got dirty just before the filming day or the previous week. But now it's fresh from the wash, so I can share it with you. This one I also made at my sewing class, and it is made with a pattern that is made for my body, so with my own measurements, and it fits really nice. The only thing that I would change if I was to do another one, I would change this shoulder seam maybe by 1 centimeter upwards, because it doesn't sit on my shoulder exactly where it should. But it's not a big deal, it's just a 1 centimeter difference, I think. And the fabric that I used for this is some cotton linen blend from Miss Matatabi from Japan. She has an Etsy shop, and I have ordered fabrics from there before. It's a very basic, classic shirt with a collar and buttons, darts in the front and also in the back. There's a pleat in the back as well, and I didn't sew a button or a buttonhole at the top because I never wear my shirts buttoned up all the way, so it made it a little bit easier. I found these really nice buttons from our local fabric shop, which go really well with the fabric, and also buttons in the cuffs, quite narrow cufflinks, and there is this slit here, and the edges of the cufflinks are in 45-degree angle, because if you left them straight they would start poking out. And I learned so many good tips and tricks while sewing this that I hope that I will remember later as well. There are so many little things that you learn and then you forget once the project is done. So I think I should make another shirt pretty soon so that I would keep those good advice in my mind. I have been wearing this one a lot too, and it goes quite nicely with my Moonman sweater as well. Couple of small finished things that I made this weekend are these 2 batches. Just little buttons with some embroidery. We had some materials for these at the knitting retreat where I went to, and I made these 2 buttons. The other one is already attached to my fringe bag, and it says knit, and this other one just has some random stitches in it. I don't know where I'm going to be using this one for. Then on to whips. I have had a big project that I've been knitting on, and I'm still knitting on it, which I can't show you yet, which means that I haven't had that much knitting time, but because it's been a long time since my last episode, I have a pile of finished objects, and I have some things that I have been working on as well. Not a lot, but I will show you the ones that I have made some progress with. So I finished the first sock of my Desert Fog socks. This is my own pattern that I have published on Ravelry. You might remember these sample socks. And they are an ankle height sock with a really addictive stitch pattern at the top. And then some, it continues to a ribbing, a kind of ribbing, which then continues to the actual ribbing with some cables. It's a toe-up sock, and it looks quite different in a variegated yarn. And I just wanted to knit another pair in a different yarn, just to see how it knits up. And I have started working on, oops, wrong bag. I've started on working on the next sock as well. It's not much, but it started. And I'm knitting it on my 2.5 higher sharps. And this morning when I was knitting on these, I got really annoyed with this cable. These are not my preferred needles. I like the Chow Goose better, especially because of the cable. I know that this is quite a long cable. I think this might be 1 meter. I think it's longer than 80, which I normally use, which I have in my Chow Goose, and it makes it even more annoying to have this too long cable. But the way the cable just curls is so annoying because it comes in the way of your knitting sometimes, whereas the Chow Goose cable just sits, it's more like relaxed. It doesn't curl up like this one. And the tips are a tiny bit too sharp for my tight knitting, because I have to push with my finger when I'm knitting, and it is really sharp. But it's very good for pattern stitches, especially if you need to knit two together or do something like cables or something. I like them for that. So, Desert Fog socks by me, and the pattern is available on Ravelry, so go check them out if you are interested in knitting up a fingering weight sock which has a little bit of pattern but nothing too complicated. It's just a bit more interesting than a plain vanilla sock. And this is some leftover yarn, fiber seed sprout yarn. I think the colorway was called Beach Party. And then another pair of socks which I think I have made some progress since last time. I have finished knitting on the actual sock, and I will have to put in the heels. And here I have used Knitlops Lair Louhittaren Luola Väinämöinen sock yarn, which is the fingering weight sock yarn from my local dyer. And the colorways are Jääkarhu and Vadelma, I think. So polar bear and raspberry. Nothing much to say about these. I knitted them with 60 stitches as I usually do. Maybe about an inch, 2.5 centimeters of ribbing in the cuff. I made these top down, and I usually, when I change the color after the ribbing, I need one round in stockinette before changing the color, so that I will not get those color changes in the pearls that you can sometimes see in the ribbing. And a rounded toe, I think what this is called. And then the last whip I'm going to show you is a shawl that I just started knitting. It's totally improvised. I might write a pattern for this if it works out the way I want it to. I needed something creative knitting. I needed some creative knitting in between quite large projects that I was test knitting, and this is where I'm at. So I have this. I'm knitting this in some leftover yarns that I have in merino singles from different indie dyers, and I also started using from one fresh skein, which is this bluish violet color. This is from Garn Stories, and then the white one that I'm striping it with is Teacup. It's Hedgehog Fibers. And then here on the sides I have, I think both of these colors are from Lustig Yarns, which is a Finnish indie dyer. So it's going to be a triangle shawl with lots of garter stitch, which was exactly what I needed at the time. I-cord edging here, and then some chevron shaping in the sides, which you can't really see yet because of the stiff cable. But I'm in no rush with this. I will keep this as my mindless knit or my creative knit whenever I need to do that kind of knitting. And I will let you know if it progresses into a design. Then finally I want to show you a couple of yarns that we received and I also bought from the knitting retreat. So the yarn is by my local dyer Louhittaren Luola, Knitlops Lair in English. And as I said, this is 100% Finsheep wool. This is the yarn that I use for my hat. And it is 330 meters per 100 grams. And these are the 250 gram skeins that we received at the retreat to make the hat. Or this is what is left from the 50 gram skein. I haven't weighed it. I don't know how much is left, but it feels like maybe almost half of it is still left. So if you have 50 and 50 for the hat, it should be well enough. So same color as in these socks, jääkarhu, polar bear. And then this colorway is called keltamulta. I have also used this in many of my socks in a different base. But I felt like these were not exactly my colors because I'm more of a pink person. So I decided to change the color, and I bought 100-gram skein of this pink colorway, which is called Utu. And I actually thought when I was knitting that the color somehow changed, or the combination changed the individual colors. I think in the hat the blue comes out more turquoise than what it is actually in a single skein, or even with this yellow. And I think with brioche stitch you don't really know how the colors play until you have knitted a few rounds. But I still love it, and there's plenty of left for me to do some other maybe color work or brioche projects. I'm thinking mittens. I need to start knitting mittens because I haven't done any mittens since years and years back. I have one work in progress in this yarn, which I would like to finish someday, but it requires a lot of brain power. So it has been waiting in the project bag for over a year now. But maybe one day I will finish those two. So that's all for the knitting and sewing for this episode. I will be traveling to Edinburgh Yarn Festival in March, and if you are coming too, please come and say hi if you see me there. I have planned on going to the marketplace and the festival on Thursday and Friday. I will be attending the big knit night on Thursday at Corn Exchange. And I think on Friday I will be at the Meet the Podcasters in the podcast lounge. And then I'm not sure about Saturday. I might come to the festival on Saturday as well, but I'm not sure. If I want to do a bit of exploring in the city, I might do it on Saturday. Then on Sunday I have booked to go to the Sunday as EYF event at Corn Exchange. And I will be flying back home on Monday. So if you want to meet me, I think the best bet would be to come to the Meet the Podcasters event on Friday at 2 to 3 p.m. at the Podcaster Lounge, which is sponsored by Blacker Yarns, or to the big knit night at Corn Exchange on Thursday night, which is from 6 to 9:30 p.m. I'm not sure if I will be there the whole time, but at least a couple of hours, I would believe. So that is so far the plan for EYF, and I have been thinking about making a little episode about my preparations for the festival, what to bring, what I will be bringing to the festival, and what sort of planning I do before going, and that sort of thing that might be useful for you as well if you're going there for the first time. And then finally, I had a question in my Ravelry group, which I forgot to mention. So you can find me on Instagram as Finfrost, as well as on Ravelry. And we have a Ravelry group for the podcast, which you can search in the groups tab. It's called FROSTBITES podcast. And there is a questions and answers thread, and also each episode has their own thread with the show notes. I don't do very extensive show notes, but I usually list the things that I talk about, the projects, the WIPs and the FOs, and if you want more information about them, you can head over to my projects page in Ravelry and follow the link from there to the original design if you want to know more about them. But anyway, Nelly J, I think that's how you pronounce your Ravelry name. If not, I'm sorry. Nelly J asked me how I learned English, and I already typed in a short answer in the group, but I think other people have asked me that question as well, and I'm not sure if I've ever answered it in my podcast. So most of my language or my speaking skills in English I have learned when I've been au pairing and traveling in England and England and Australia. And I was au pairing for a family for about 9 months, years and years back, and I've also traveled a lot. I usually travel alone, so that makes me having to be able to speak in a foreign language. I have always been very interested in languages, and especially English, and I wanted to go as an exchange student at some point in my life, but my parents didn't want me to go. I was really young. I was way too young when I had the urge to go. So I think my parents made the right decision. But when I went for au pairing, I really tried to focus on learning to speak, because from school I already had good language skills for writing and for grammar and all that sort of thing, but the speaking was always a bit more difficult, and we didn't practice that so much at school. And I wanted to learn the basic words that you would need in your everyday life, and I think au pairing was a very good experience for that, because you don't learn, say, the kitchen words or cleaning words or whatever you need in your everyday normal life in a house. And that was really helpful for me. And my au pair family was a mixture of nationalities. The mother was or is half Finnish and half American, and the father is Australian, and the children were all born in different continents, I think. and the mother wanted me to speak Finnish for the kids so that they could learn the language a little bit. So when I was working during the day, I only spoke Finnish. But then in the evenings and during the weekends when I hung out with my friends, I would learn English, and with the parents I spoke mostly in English. And since I came back, I think it was when I came back from au pairing, I started reading a lot of books in English, and I usually read them out loud just because I wanted to maintain the language. Whereas if you just read and not speak the words, I think it's easier to forget. At least you don't maintain the habit of speaking in a different language. So I think that has helped me to maintain some of the speaking skills. I have forgotten a lot, and I feel like I'm not as fluent as I used to be, which is normal, having spent so many years back in Finland after that. And then I go to my sewing class once a week, where the teacher is German, and she teaches in English, and all our conversations are in English. And I also hear a bit of German, because there are some people who speak better German than English. So I can kind of learn a little bit of German there as well. It's a really good course because it's sort of like a language course, or a sewing course, sewing and pattern making course with a bit of English conversational class as well. And yeah, so I think that's my answer where I've learned my English. I hope that answers your question, Nelly J. And if you have any other questions, you can pop them in the thread in Ravelry. I think this is all that I have to say this time. I will hopefully be able to film an episode a bit sooner next time. And until then, happy knitting. Bye!